technical account manager, my right-hand man, my engineer extraordinaire, Mr. Russell Smith.
Thank you, sir.
So Russell and I work together on a daily basis, not just with new customers, but with our existing customer base. And as we were telling Courtney and Allie just before we started recording, we put this list together because we have seen a lot of things over the course of our experience working with small to medium business owners here in the Mid-Atlantic market. And it's amazing to us how many simple, low cost or no cost things businesses aren't doing that they can quickly set up, not a lot of money, some of them no money, just a little bit of time, and really improve the cybersecurity of your business. And it seems like every day we're seeing new ads about this. Baltimore County Public Schools got shut down for ransomware just a week or so ago. Russell pointed one out that hit a significant government entity just last week. So, the bad news is if they want to get you, they're going to get you. But for the most part, people are just leaving their doors wide open. And we've put together a list of things that should help you at least lock the door and put on the deadbolt so that you can get most of the criminals to ignore you. But again, if they really want to get you, they will. And we're certainly welcome to discuss strategies with you about preemptive for those. But today is all about the typical business owner and some simple and low cost and effective items that they can do to dramatically improve their cybersecurity. So Russell, with that, I'm going to hand it over to you. I know you've put together a fantastic presentation for us today.
All right. Let's go ahead and share this. All right. Everybody can see that? Perfect. So like Mike said, this is intended to be a sort of a foundation for cybersecurity and low-hanging fruit that has a big impact. This is not the end of the journey. This is to put you on a better footing than you may be now. But this is the start of a journey and the start of a discussion. And obviously, like Mike has said, as we've seen this week, that even major organizations are at risk and still have a lot of work to do. So these are also things that we think won't break the bank for you. So we've narrowed it down to a top 5. And one of the things that I like to talk about first is that cybersecurity exists in layers. And this is the same way physical or premise-based security does. So think about it this way, just because you have an alarm system on your house doesn't mean you don't need a lock on your front door. Those are things that you both want to have. Cybersecurity is the same way. So one of the things that Mike and I run into periodically is, oh, we have antivirus on our systems. Why do we need a firewall? So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. But to say that, hey, we have antivirus, that doesn't mean you're protected everywhere. That doesn't mean you're completely protected. That doesn't mean you also shouldn't have a lock on your front door. So,
and a good footnote to that, Russell, you and I
Yep.
discussed this a little bit during preparation, is it's nice that you have Avast running on your home computers, but that's really not going to be the business grade approach that you need. So it's valuable to have a conversation with whoever your managed service provider is and talk to them about what antivirus program they're using. We certainly have one that we recommend and we believe strongly in, but we also evaluate that on a regular basis to make sure that it's doing the best to protect our clients.
Right. And that's my little asterisk down here. We do run into most people we talk with do have some kind of antivirus solution running. It's usually a centrally managed one, but not always. And if you don't, you want to find out. The other little addendum I'd add there is Mac users, you need antivirus. I know that's not the party line. There is an increasing number of Mac viruses every day. And we have seen many compromised Mac systems. So you need to get on that boat too. All right. 5 things we've identified that we don't see a lot, but people should be doing. So commercial grade firewalls and running deep packet inspection. Explain that. Multi-factor authentication to protect email accounts and cloud software. Cybersecurity staff training and testing. That's a big one that a lot of people overlook, but has a major impact. Windows Active Directory security policies. That's one that most people can probably implement for the only cost is time. And then drive encryption for computers and laptops. That's another one that's probably not going to cost you anything other than the time to do it, but has a major, major impact. So let's dive into some of these things. Commercial grade firewalls. Mike, we've been to several offices before, and even medical practices where they are just using the router combo firewall that came from Comcast or Verizon.
Yeah,
And
it's terrifying actually. You mentioned medical. They have such stringent guidelines with HIPAA, and frankly, every business today, at a bare minimum, has state cyber laws that they have to follow. And if they're doing business in states like New York or California or Texas, you're required to follow their laws too.
Yep. And pretty much no compliance framework that we work with, so that's HIPAA, that's PCI, that's Defense Department, CMMC, all of them require a commercial grade firewall. You can't be compliant in any of these industry frameworks without that. So that aside, it's a little different. It's much more robust than the Comcast or Verizon box that you may have at your house. And it's much more aggressive and gives you a lot of benefits in terms of productivity that you won't get from a Verizon box. So it's not just a security thing, it's a productivity benefit as well. And we try to look for things like that, things that create value for your organization.
Yeah, Russell, when you and I were putting together this list, we talked about that when the quarantine first hit, a lot of people quickly realized that the firewall they had in place probably wasn't set up to handle the number of VPNs or the virtual private networks or individual users logging back into the office. And it probably didn't support the bandwidth that they needed either. So those are a couple of important considerations when you're looking at what firewall do you buy.
Absolutely. Firewalls are your first line of defense in many ways. They're the outer layer, at least in terms of the office network. Now, most organizations are working equally on premise and in the cloud these days. So there's a first line of defense on the cloud services. There's a first line of defense on the office network, and that's the firewall. One of the things that it's doing that is similar to your Verizon box at home is that it's blocking incoming connections to your network. I mean, that's probably the one area they overlap. So it's, programs, hackers going out just looking for open networks, open ports. The firewall is going to reject most of those connections. However, you can be much more stringent and much more granular with the controls on a commercial grade firewall. One of the things that we often do as a matter of best practice for our clients, unless they have business in these countries, we will block all access from Russia, China, Iran, several overseas countries, because they're frequent vectors and they're frequent hack sources. So we can just block any connection from those countries outright. And it's a very granular system. You can choose which ones you block. If you have business in another country, we can keep that open. One of the key differences and the biggest jump between a home box and a commercial grade firewall is they do what's called deep packet inspection. So they are actually intelligently inspecting all the traffic in and out of your offices, looking for malicious software tools, looking for viruses, looking for malware, looking for hacking type traffic. And they actually read the information, the packets, decode it if it's encrypted, read it, and then re-encrypt it and send it on its way. Hugely valuable. It's an additional layer of defense. All the traffic in and out of your office is being looked at and checked. And home equipment doesn't do that. One of the other things that Mike just mentioned that we all saw a big benefit from this year is its secure and cost-effective remote access to your network for your staff. So things like GoToMyPC, LogMe, and they get used a lot. You'll notice that they've gotten very expensive in the last couple of years. And that subscription may be hundreds of dollars a year per seat in some cases. Firewalls, now we're a SonicWall partner, but this is true of Cisco, Juniper, Palo Alto, anybody. They're going to have VPNs that are secure and encrypted The firewall manages those connections for your external users. You no longer need a LogMeIn license because it's through the firewall. SonicWall, who's our main partner, that's a one-time purchase of that license. And it's user agnostic. So you buy your license one time, it's $45. That's good for years. It can even be transferred to your new firewall when you upgrade it in a few years. Much more cost effective than LogMeIn and much more secure. It allows you to better track user access, restrict things, set time periods, a lot more control. And those connections from your remote staff to your office are encrypted, so they can't be intercepted, or even if they are, they can't be read.
And Russell, I just want to make one quick point about this. I had a colleague of mine who owns a successful business here in Maryland say to me recently, well, I don't have a firewall because I'm too small. And my response to her was, are you too small to make money? No. Okay, then you're not too small to have a firewall for your business. And, you know, we've seen these start conservatively around $1,500 to get the device, and, you know, for
even less than that, depending on the size of your staff and your internet connection. So this is not, thank you, Mike, this is not a huge chunk of money. Most small businesses were probably deploying firewalls, like Mike said, in the $1,000 to $1,500 range. And that'll have a year of security services. It can be renewed for a much smaller amount on following years. But this is not, you don't need to spend $10,000, $20,000 for excellent firewall protection. And our vendors, they've done several updates recently to increase speeds for smaller companies. SonicWall has a brand new line that just came out last month, which is designed for our market. So we have gigabit FiOS now. Here's a small, affordable firewall that can handle that gigabit internet FiOS connection for your small and medium business very cost effectively. One of the other things that is a great benefit to firewalls is they manage backup and failover connections. Most of our clients have a backup internet connection. The firewall will automatically flip your office onto that backup if the main goes down. So Comcast goes out, no problem. You've got a backup Verizon circuit, you have a backup fiber circuit, you may have a backup 4G modem through AT&T or Verizon. That firewall is going to switch your entire office over in a few seconds. It's also going to fire an alert off to you or your IT company to say, hey, we're in a failover situation. You need to call Comcast and get that issue resolved. Very valuable. Let's see, it also, one of the big benefits that we see is content filtering. And this is both a productivity and security benefit. You want to keep people off sites that may have gray market software or black market software that is likely to contain viruses. You want to block that through your content filter. You also may want to look at blocking things that hurt your productivity. So most of our clients say block Netflix. They don't want people on it in the middle of the day while they're working, of course. And a commercial firewall gives you that granularity. You can even block specific sites or whole categories of sites. Other thing they're very good for is reporting. So if you have a little Verizon or Comcast box and there is a piece, there's an infected machine on your network, there's a machine that has bad network traffic and that maybe is slowing the whole network down, very hard, if not impossible, to identify the source of that problem without a commercial firewall with robust logging. So we can go into a commercial grade firewall, we can find out, hey, here's the machine with the malware that's sending a lot of traffic, here's the machine that has bad, maybe has a bad network card that's hurting the network, we can trace that down with a firewall. So it's preventing issues, it's helping resolve issues more quickly. Anything to add there, Mike?
No, I think you touched it all.
Yeah, and like I said, it's not as expensive and you think, it's easier to implement than you think.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the low cost ones that most businesses should look at adding sooner rather than later, especially with everything we're going through.
Absolutely, and every vendor has a very nice lineup scaling based on need. So, they are aware that a 10-person company does not have the resources of a 100-person company. And most of them, like SonicWall, our partner, you get the same protection regardless of that scale. It's just scaled based on the users and the internet connection, but that security level is the same. Multi-factor, two-factor authentication for email and key software. This is the single best protection that we have for our clients' email accounts, bar none. So the classic case of this is phishing, which we'll get into in a minute. You have a staff member, they get an email that said, oh, hey, you have a message in Microsoft Teams or Google Docs. Log in to check it. It's not actually from Microsoft or Google. It's actually a hacker trying to phish information from this person. And when they pop in their email and password, guess what? Now they have provided their email and password to that hacker who can rampage through. They can pull email, they can look at your vendors, they can look at your clients. They will start firing off messages to every person in their address book. And now you have to go back and explain to your clients what happened, and please ignore this message. And we want to avoid that.
We've had many of our clients say to us, you know, do we need Advantage to set this up for us? And the answer is no. We're here to help. You know, and we charge for that time. We certainly do. But this is a fairly straightforward implementation. And if you're willing to take the time, your internal staff should be able to handle turning on multi-factor authentication, certainly for your email and probably for most of the software that offers it as well.
And one of the things that's happened in the last couple of years is the major services have built this into the platform. So, you know, the two big gorillas in the business email marketplace are Microsoft 365 and Google Business. Both of them now build this in. And it's nothing you pay extra for. It's not a special license. If you have an email license from these companies, you have access to this. And it's a matter of turning it on for those users. You can do it on a case-by-case basis. We recommend it's on for everybody. And then it's a simple matter of making a few changes to their Outlook profile or their phone. But it's typically a matter of, and it's not a lot of pain, because the next question we get asked is, so, hey, I'm on two-factor, great. I have an app on my phone or I get a text message now. Am I going to have to do that every single time I open Outlook? Or am I going to have to do that every single time I turn on my computer? And the answer is no. All these services have what's called trusted devices. So if it's a machine that you use frequently, Microsoft or Google knows that. They track it. You can edit or remove them. But it will only ask you for that two-factor on a trusted device, typically every 90 days or so. So it's not inconvenient for your staff. There's a one-time setup, and every 90 days they'll get a text message, and they'll enter that right into Outlook or on their web browser. Not a big deal. Now, when your staff is on other computers, if they're on the web browser, if they're on somebody else's computer, a guest computer, if they're traveling, they're going to get that code right away. They're going to enter it right away.
And that really is the point, right?
It's
anytime
that
a
simple.
new device tries to log in,
right?
They're letting you know.
Right, and we have seen this happen before where we've had compromised accounts. I had somebody call me up last month, say, Russell, I'm an idiot. I'm so sorry. I think I just gave my password away. And I said, no problem, let's take a look. And I knew they had two factors, so I was pretty calm. It was fascinating because we could actually go on Microsoft's website and see someone from Nigeria attempting to log in to the account and being rejected because they had no 2FA code. And we could actually see this in logging. So very easy. We changed their password anyway, as a matter of best practice. We always want to do that, but their account was not compromised. Nobody got into their information. Nobody started sending things out. And that's what we want to happen. Very effective. Nothing is 100% foolproof, but I will tell you, any client at Advantage we have turned this on for, we have never had a compromised account. Google actually announced, I think it was last year, since they had turned on the servers for over 80,000 employees, they had not had a compromised employee email account. So very easy to implement, very low cost, huge, huge impact. And this is one of the ones, this is one of our top recommendations. Ah, cybersecurity training to staff. This is a nice dovetail. So Like I say here, people are your biggest security weakness, right? Because people can get tricked, people can make mistakes. And that's usually what it is. It's very fascinating. One of the most popular, if not the most popular attack vector these days is the phishing email. So it is, an email, like I said, pretending to be from Microsoft or pretending to be from a colleague or a client, asking you to sign in, asking you to wire transfer money, various activities. It looks legit. These emails have very sophisticated graphics, so they will be using Microsoft logos. And you really have to kind of look into if I mouse over the link, does that still point to Microsoft? And it could be even simple things like, is the person's name spelled correctly? And we see all these. So you look for all these little mistakes. You look for all these little telltale signs in the email to prevent being tricked. And this is one of the layers of cybersecurity. And this is as we've improved automated protections, these hackers have switched to tricking people because that's easier than actually hacking into a system. If somebody opens the gate for you, you don't have to climb over the wall. And that's really what these guys are counting on.
Russell and I discovered that this was a product in high demand, somewhat by accident. We offer this as part of our flat rate support service for our clients, where they will get regular training. And even more important, we reach out to the client every month and say, hey, Bob Smith didn't take the training again. We need to sit down and talk to Bob and let him know how important this is, because all of a sudden, with Bob not taking the training, he now becomes the highest human risk to the company.
Yeah.
And we had a large company right in Columbia reach out to us and say, hey, look, we think we're doing a good job with a lot of our cybersecurity, but the training, we're not getting through to our people. We're not getting the penetration. And they've been on the system with us now for a year, and they've really been pleased in the dramatic improvement that we've gotten in their staff participation, which has raised the staff education, which has dramatically driven down the exploit. And the best part is this is really inexpensive on a per person basis. I think it's a couple dollars a month per employee. Yeah. So if you've got 20 employees, maybe we're talking $40 a month. It's a really low cost solution.
Yeah, or like I said, we'll include it in our standard managed services plan because we believe it's so important. It helps us too. So think about it that way. If we don't have to clean up a data breach, well, that saves you a lot of time and money, saves you a lot of reach out to clients, it saves us a lot of time and money if we don't have to clean it up anymore. So it's very beneficial to every party involved if we can prevent these things. Like anything else, consistency, repetition, reinforcement is very key. That's the biggest mistake I think people make in this area, that we will talk with people. Oh yeah, we do cybersecurity. I'll say, great, how do you do that? It's like, well, once a year, somebody comes in, we talk about it for half an hour. And I can almost guarantee that is probably gone from people's minds next week, if not that same day. So like anything else, you want to reinforce, you want to teach, and all the time, and have people kind of thinking about this all the time. So, but we talk about our process here. So we'll come in, we'll do those presentations a couple times a year. I'm doing a couple next month for one of our large clients. They bring on all the new people and anybody who failed a recent security test. So I'll be doing a brush up with them. We hand out one page, it's kind of cheat sheets here, warning red flags to look for. But we couple that with monthly training and monthly testing. And this is very important. So all of our clients, they get an email like this. You've got a training class. It's going to be a 1 to 2 minute video with 5 or 6 questions. And we know this we know this from school. If you have a quiz on it, people pay more attention. So we have a little quiz, but the whole thing can be done in less than 5 minutes. We want to make it simple enough that it refreshes, but it doesn't distract from the work or the day. And that's very good. We'll go over the results at the end of the month with the client. Anybody who failed the test or didn't take it, they'll follow back up and make sure those employees take that test in the coming month. The other thing, and this is the fun one, we send out fake phishing emails. And we've done some pretty nasty ones. One will be like, you've got that team message, or one that always gets people is your mailbox is full. And so most of these hackers, they're trying to scare people, because if you're scared, you don't stop to think. They also, it's very interesting, we can even see the timing of spam messages like this peaks Friday afternoon and Monday morning. Why does it do that? Because people are in a hurry. They're either trying to get their week started or they're trying to leave the office, and the bad guys know that. So you're less likely to stop and think about the email you're looking at and just respond to it, and then think about it and go, whoops, what did I just do? So very interesting. And then, like Mike said, we review this with the clients and make sure that people are going back and taking it seriously. Again, you follow back with your staff and say, hey, we are paying attention to this, we are reviewing, and we will come back to you if you haven't taken that quiz. People take it seriously and it protects. We've seen major improvements at the clients we've rolled this out for. We had a large client where the first month we had, out of 200 people, we had over 20 people tricked into handing over the credentials. That scared the bejesus out of myself and our client and their IT department. They were horrified. And guess what? Several of those people were C-suite level people. So the most important people in the company, the email accounts you would least like somebody else to be able to read. 3 months into this, now we are typically seeing maybe 2 or 3 people being tricked. So it works, it's effective, and you don't need to spend a lot of time or money to have that kind of impact. Here's another good freebie for most folks is Windows Active Directory security policies. So most companies in our area are on some kind of Microsoft Windows server network. And that's servers, could be on-site, could be in the cloud, could be through the Azure AD service. And those are servers that manage the user logins, the passwords, the permissions. So, if at your company, you can log into a neighbor's computer if yours is broken, but you log in with your own credentials, your own username and password, that's all administered through the Windows Active Directory network. Windows Active Directory is also a requirement for a lot of compliance frameworks like CMMC Defense Department. But there are all kinds of lovely password and security policies that you can implement. There are a lot more than I list here. I think these are the biggies that have a major impact. So
yeah, Russell, in fact, if you Google top 20 passwords, you get a comprehensive list of the most common ones.
Yep.
So start there. If any of yours are showing up on that list, get rid of them now.
Absolutely. So there are all kinds of and these policies are built in Windows and Windows servers. So this is nothing you have to go out and buy. It's a matter of turning them on and implementing them in a prescribed manner. So password length and complexity. We have a lot of conversations about passwords because everybody has too many passwords. One of the things that we'll probably go into in another webinar is password managers and best practices around those. But for the sake of today's discussion, password length is a big one. National Institute of Standards updated their password guidelines a couple of years ago. Most companies are following them now, but not everybody. You will see people kind of following older regulations still. But the typical guideline is, a 12 to 16 or more character password. The length of passwords has a dramatic, massive impact on how long it would take to crack them using tools. So you add 1 character, it's an exponential equation. So each digit you add makes that password crack exponentially harder. It's very good. So you're sort of trying to balance. We always like to say at Advantage, there is a trade-off between convenience and security. You're always trying to balance those two things. So you want a password that's long enough to be secure, not so long that you're always going to mess up typing it in or won't remember it. How do you remember a 16-character password, though? Because we get asked that all the time. How are my staff going to remember that? I can't remember a 16-character password. One of the changes in a NIST recommendation is it doesn't have to be a word. It can be a phrase. That's one of the nice things with these longer passwords. And 16 is usually a minimum. You can go quite longer than that. So I'll go with a phrase from a book or a movie or a film that's a favorite of mine. So something that's meaningful to me, but isn't something that's easy to guess. One of the things I always tell people is, if it's on Facebook, don't use it. in your password, your dog is on Facebook. Your dog's name is on Facebook, and your cats, I'm sure. Your kids are on pets. And I see so many people that use variations of, well, here's my kids and their birthdays. Great. Are your kids' names and birthdays on Facebook? Probably. Or they'll use their pets' names. And it's like, okay, well, that could be guessed. That could be tried. So, avoid things that are out there, but things that you can remember and are meaningful to you. And that's the way to go. The other interesting thing that came along is with the new NIST guidelines is used to be passwords, and you still run into this at a lot of organizations where password reset every 30 days or 90 days. NIST got away from that because they realized that what are people doing? Well, they're typically putting, if they've changed their password every 30 days, they can't remember it. So what do? And we've seen this walking around offices. They put a little Post-it note on their monitor with their password written out. And I have literally walked around with an IT director at a major client to every desk in the office and pulled down dozens of Post-it notes with passwords on people's screens or desks. So NIST realizes this was a problem, and they said, look, it doesn't matter if we make people change it every 30 days if they just write it down and they can't remember it. So they've shifted to an annual cadence. But I should note that should be paired with these other policies and with two-factor. The other thing I always add too is if you don't use your work password anywhere else. Like don't use, and I should have put that on the list, but don't use your work password on LinkedIn. Don't use your work password on Facebook. Don't use your work password on your personal Gmail account. It should only be used for work. One of the other policies that we like enforcing through the server is password fail attempts. So one of the common tactics is a brute force password attack, where basically the hacker has a computer program try variations of passwords. They will start with that list that Mike mentioned of the top 20 passwords and just say, hey, I'm going to put in this person's email and these top 20 passwords, and let's see if anything comes back and lets me in. So we implement password fail attempt policies. If you enter the wrong password 5 times in 15 minutes, it's going to lock your account and you can't log in for a certain period of time. That's an easy one to implement, easy one to fix. Your IT department can always unlock that user if they really just messed up, so it's not a big deal, but it has a big protection impact. The other one that we recommend, and this is more physical and premise-based security, is having a lock screen on the computer. So this is actually required for HIPAA compliance and for a lot of Department of Defense and other compliance, but basically saying, hey, if that person gets up and walks away from their computer, something should happen to lock that screen and prevent other people from just sitting down and reading all their email or files or copying data off.
It should happen fairly quickly.
Yeah. Now, that's always a little bit of a discussion with you as to what's an appropriate amount of time. And again, you're trying to strike that convenience and security balance of, well, if it's 2 minutes, that's going to drive everybody insane. And I will have a line of people at my door complaining. And so you're going to try to find the right interval for your company and organization. But if you have a server, these are easy to implement and roll out, and it works across the company. Just turn them on, set them up and turn them on. Data encryption, that's the last one I want to really hit on today. So one thing that most people don't know is that almost everybody at this point in a work environment has a password on their computer, right? That's one of those very, very simple things that I hope we don't need to mention, like the antiviruses, that you should be having that. However, if your drive isn't encrypted on a computer, even though it has a password, somebody who is an IT person like myself can open up your computer like we see here, pop the drive out, plug it into another computer, and they can be reading your data in 15 minutes. I've done this before in terms of restoring data for people. And so most people don't realize that. They think that password protection is good enough, but let's say you leave your laptop on the metro. Let's say somebody breaks into your office or your car where your laptop is and steals it. Better hope that laptop's encrypted, or you've got a data breach. And that basically somebody with that laptop has access to all the data on that hard drive. Very easy to protect again. So we're looking at low-hanging fruit that you can get going with right away. Drive encryption is built into Microsoft Windows 10 Pro, not the Home Edition, the Pro Edition, but we are talking about businesses here, and Apple OS X and OS 11. So they call them different things. It's BitLocker and FileVault. They do the same thing. It's going to encrypt the drive so that there has to be a key entered from that computer to read the contents of a drive. If I pull the drive out, plug it into another machine, all it's going to tell me is it can't read anything. That's an encrypted drive. Very easy to turn on, very easy to enable, and invisible to the end user if it's a business machine. These computers from Apple, Microsoft, Dell, HP, Lenovo, all the business makers have what's called a TPM, or a trusted platform module chip, on the motherboard, which is basically an authenticator key saying this computer is allowed to unlock this drive. And it is tied to your computer login. So entering the password when you turn on the computer sends the command to this chip to unlock the drive. If you have an older computer, guess what? You can still turn this on. It just means there's going to be one extra login screen when you first boot that computer. So very minimal impact to users. It's not inconvenient, but it has a massive impact. We really like it. My last point there is we have a client that's a Medicaid provider. They were visiting one of their clients in DC. Their car was broken into, their laptop was stolen. We have to file a HIPAA breach report when these kinds of things happen. The breach report was the laptop was stolen on this date. It is protected by Microsoft Windows BitLocker encryption. And that was the extent of the breach report. Because the federal government is so confident in Microsoft and Apple's protections that we don't need to go further than that to know that the data was secured and safe. We actually track compliance with encryption through our remote monitoring system. And so your IT company, your IT department, or somebody like us should be able to do that to verify that all your systems are protected. But again, that's very easy, low-hanging fruit with a massive, massive impact. If you don't have a data breach, if you don't have to notify all your clients or pay fines to the federal government, it's well worth the 15 to 30 minutes it takes to set this up.
Yeah, so Russell, we got a couple of questions in the chat box.
Excellent.
Pretty awesome.
All right.
And I think you're going to enjoy these.
Okay.
Because they come from a fellow smart person.
Uh-oh.
So the first one is, how does MFA work when hackers engage in a SIM swap?
When engage in a what?
A SIM swap.
That is a problem. This is why, like I said, there are layers of protection. So a SIM swap, for those who don't know, would be basically somehow they either got your phone's SIM card, which is the identifying card, that's that little chip that they put in at the Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile store that identifies your phone number with your phone. There are hacks where that can be duplicated potentially, or if somebody steals your phone, of course, that can happen. So one thing is, your phone should have its own encryption on it and its own authentication on it. So it can be a keypad, can be a thumbprint, can be a visual identification. So your phone should always be protected for that reason too. So even if they steal your phone, they can't get into that text message. Obviously, if that happens, you want to notify us right away. That said, we are aware of this. We've read about it. It does not seem to be a very easy attack to carry out right now.
I was going to say
that's part of the calculation here. Yeah.
This is a classic example of if a hacker wants your specific data bad enough, they can get it. But 95% of attacks are not that strategic.
Hackers are lazy like everybody else.
Yeah,
honestly.
Criminals are lazy.
Right.
And there's plenty of open doors that,
Mm.
unless they have a specific reason to do that, they're not going, so someone tried to hack Elon Musk a month or so ago. I'm sure you read about this, where a gentleman from Russia reached out to a Tesla employee and said, hey, I'll give you $1 million if you take this little piece of software and install it on your computer when you go to work the next day. And the employee very smartly said to the hacker, sure, I'll take your money. He immediately went to leadership and said, I was approached. Leadership got the FBI involved, and they actually arrested the hacker at the airport before he could fly back to Russia.
So that said, yeah, and that's a great example of a targeted attack. So targeted attacks are different. And most of what we've addressed today are those lazy generic attacks. And think about it this way. The hacker, if they can take an hour and send out, through automated processes, 20,000 emails trying to fish for credentials, they're going to get a computer program that manages that process for them. And then their computer, they're going to get an Excel spreadsheet probably with, here are all the ones that people filled in their information for. So
and they're going to work
they
on
did
those
an hour of
money.
work,
Yeah.
and then they're going to follow up their, so we're talking about that kind of hack. But this is also why we do layers of security. So this is why, just this is not good enough in itself. This is why you still have a complicated password. So now they need two things to get. We have systems. Now, if you're in a very heavily protected industry, we may have an additional layer. So you can do a third layer of multi-factor authentication. It doesn't have to be 2, it can be 3. And that can be things like personal, that can be things like thumbprints, facial recognition. Typically is that third layer, and particularly protected industries, we recommend something like that. So there are additional protection layers you can add, but then there's also the thing with, hey, I guess the example I brought up earlier where we had a client that was phished and we could see the person trying to log in from Nigeria, we still change their passwords everywhere. We still do that. So we don't want to treat any of these things independently by itself as good enough.
And Russell, well done, because you basically answered the next question in the queue was, if second factor authentication is SMS, shouldn't the next factor be a physical token? You basically just said yes.
Yeah.
There are a number of ways to approach that.
Right. And again, I think it depends on industry and level of effort, right? So, we're focusing on things that people can easily turn on quickly here today. Phone is part of that. Right. That said, we do have clients that use physical tokens, and that is more secure than a text message. But it's one of these things where nothing to text message is a massive increase in security. Going text message, it's still an increase to a physical device. It's not as massive an increase. So we were kind of focusing on the biggies here today, but absolutely. Physical devices, we do use those, and they may be, actually my first one of those was World of Warcraft, and that was my first keychain physical authenticator that I ever used. And I
had a thumb token a few years ago. I worked for a pretty large national corporation. We used thumb tokens so that we could access our VPN so that we could remote into the system.
Another common one is smart cards. And they're not the Metro smart cards, but the form factor is the same. It's basically a credit card size device with a chip in it that is assigned to the employee. We have Defense Department contractor clients where to use their computer, they have to insert their smart card into the computer and sign in and MFA. So they're using, and enter a code from their phone. So they have 3 steps in that case. To access these computers for their DoD work.
Well, Russell, I think you did a brilliant job today. I love the fact that out of all of these, the one that's the most expensive, quote unquote, is firewall. And for most of the viewing audience today, we're talking under $2,000 in investment. All the other ones are either no cost other than some time or a minimal cost on a monthly basis. And folks, if you implement these, you are putting yourself ahead of probably 70% of the small business owners that are out there and really doing a fantastic job, not only protecting your data, but protecting your clients' data and protecting your brand and reputation. So thank you, sir. On point as always.
Yeah, and I guess I'd just like to add that, like I said at the beginning, this is sort of the start of good cybersecurity. This is not the end.
Yeah.
And so, we recommend a lot of industries. We're seeing a lot of adoption of specific policy frameworks, PCI, HIPAA. And so look at the ones for your industry. They're going to give you a blueprint for what's recommended for you. And so work with your IT department, work with your IT company, work with an MSP like Advantage. They're going to help you look at those security frameworks and implement the recommendations, and which will probably go much beyond what we talked about today. But this is a great foundation.
Yeah, Russell, that's a good parting note. Russell and I spend a lot of time working on compliance, whether that's PCI, HIPAA, GDPR, NIST, DOD, the list goes on and on, it seems. Over 90% of small business owners have never once had a voluntary compliance audit because they're expensive and they tell you things that you don't want to hear. But if you implement the things that you saw in today's presentation, you'll be pleasantly surprised at how you move head and shoulders above a lot of your competition. So with that, thank you all very much. And again, thank you, Greater Bethesda Chamber of Commerce, for this professional engagement. We love you folks.